Hey, Canteeners, welcome back to the next episode of Culper's Canteen Cup. It's episode 84, and it's not my fault. Josh, it's not my fault. You are my Robin Williams right now. You're my Robin Williams to Matt Damon. It's not my fault. This is the third time we're trying this podcast because my internet just apparently sucked. So now I'm hardwired in and we're ready to go. So hopefully this one will go through. We're well rehearsed for the first 5 minutes, and I feel like I'm going through the motions here. I swear, I feel like I've rehearsed these lines. But so the last time I was in DC, as you all know, I went to a baseball game, went to a Nationals game. And normally I'm really not into baseball until I go to a game. And when I go to a game and see it in person, it brings back, I don't know, it's just a totally different feeling. It was great being there in the ballpark. Nationals have a great park, and got to sit along the first baseline about maybe 50 feet from Josh Bell. They're playing first base, 6'4", 260, moves like a cheetah. It was just great being there at the game, and now I've been kind of watching baseball again. Uh, and I figure, why not? Let's just start this off with a little BS session. Maybe talk about a little boxing, a little Ronda Rousey, and Josh. Do the Atlanta Braves? I mean, do they even still have a baseball team, or what? And are you still a fan of Joe Dillon, or what's going on?
Um, so yeah, to answer both questions first, yeah, the Braves still have a team. I don't know if you heard, they're the defending World Series champs. They won the World Series last year, so I'm not sure if you were tracking that. And you should have gotten up with Joe Dillon while you were there. I heard he's back with the Nats. Um, he's back from the Phillies. So.
He is. Can you believe it? Tell the backstory on that one.
All right, so we tried to record, open kimono here, and we tried to record the other day, and once again we had some technical difficulties, and I won't point out who's was the culprit in those, but so we basically this is the same story that we told like twice before Roger almost had a thermonuclear meltdown because we couldn't get our act together, and so I made the comment. I was like, dude, the Nats. All three of us were stationed in the DC area. I went to a lot of Nats games. Especially whenever the Braves came to town. If you remember Chris T from one of our earlier episodes, the whiskey made me do it. Him and I, big Braves fans, have been our whole lives. We would go down and see them, and so I made the comment. I was like, yeah, I stopped caring about the Nats once, Joe Dillon, I think it was episode 4, Joe Dillon's jockstrap left and went to the Phillies. And Luke pointed out to me, Luke's like, Joe Dillon's back with the Nats. I was like, oh, all right. Hey, so we're going to care about the Nats again. Because Joe Dillon's with them. I had no idea. And then we tried to re-record. And on the re-record, I was like, "Hey, did you guys know that Joe Dillon's back with the Nats?" Like I'd known it all along, which I obviously had not. So a little,
and of course, Paul Harvey. The rest of that story was Josh was motherfucking you until Luke informed him that you were coming back to the Nats, or that you were back with the Nats. He's like, "Yeah, f that dude." And he's like, "Is he even in the league anymore?" And Luke's like, "Yeah, he's actually back down with the Nats." So then it just became, "Oh yeah, well he's with the Nats now. It's all good." You don't listen anyway. Whatever.
No, I would never MF Joe Dillon. Yeah. So yeah, man. So the Braves still have a team. Again, it's early in the season. I was a little put off by by the strike and the back and forth, which delayed spring training a little bit. People are again. It goes back to the strike in the '90s, which it turned a lot of people off. There's people out there struggling right now just to put gas in their car. They're paying $4+ at the pump, and you have guys who play baseball. Not even the whole year. Arguing about 150 million is not good enough. I want 160 million, and so it's just a little off-putting. When you look at what the average Americans out there going through right now. And but no, they're back on track. They made a couple of moves in the offseason. One of my favorite players left. I was a big Freddie Freeman fan. Freddie Freeman was their first baseman. He was going to be, he was going to be their franchise player. he was like the Chipper Jones. Freddie Freeman, he's been with the Braves for a long time, and he really wanted to stay. And I don't know, the ins and outs of it, but they couldn't get to a number that they agreed upon. He crushed it in the playoffs. He crushed it in the World Series. He wanted a certain amount. The Braves weren't willing to pay, and the Braves have historically been a team, they want to try and do things on the cheap. So he left. He went to the Dodgers, which kind of I was a little upset that he went to the Dodgers, not from his standpoint, but it was known before he went that the Dodgers were going to be the ones to make that play for him. And they're a big rival of Atlanta. They had to, they played him in the playoffs, and, for him to go to, their number one competitor, it was a little disheartening. They just had a series, and, Freddie Freeman did really well in the series. But they picked up Matt Olson out of the Athletics for first baseman. He has pretty good numbers. He's great. He made his debut in 2016, so he's been around the league a little bit. So we'll see what happens, man. I'm still still a Braves fan. I like watching baseball. I'd rather go to the games. I can watch it on TV. I can have it on in the background. It's hard for me to sit down and just watch a game straight through. That's the only thing I do. I can't. It's really hard. I can have it on in the background. Yeah, man. Other than that, just glad baseball's back. That and college football. Those are really the only two sports I watch anymore. Oh, and curling. I watch curling when the Winter Olympics roll around because
hell yeah.
Dude, curling is just a bunch of 40-plus-year-old dads out there with dad bods absolutely crushing it.
Like, is that shit not addicting though? Like, that stuff comes on TV and like you cannot not watch something. Like, you have to watch that.
Dude, the curling. So I didn't even know curling was this big. I started looking around. Dude, they have a curling association here in North Carolina. I was like, where do you guys get together and play? I want to go watch it. Like, to me, it's fascinating.
You'd be a great sweeper. I can tell by your form. You'd be the great. What do they call them? I don't even know what they call them. Like those two people with the little brooms.
Yeah. No, that would be me because I'm not flexible enough. I don't know what position it is. The guy who actually is behind it that pushes it and lets it go, like that dude's way too flexible for it to be me. I'd have to be one of the sweepers too.
He does do it like in a yoga pose. He like goes down on the back leg. I'm like, oh yeah, that'd break me down.
I might be able to do it then. I might be able to do it. I haven't been in yoga in like 3 weeks, so I need to. I need to get back in it. Whatever.
Well, and like Josh said, it's hard for me to sit there and watch baseball, on TV. Sometimes I'll have it going on in the background, not really following it if I'm doing something else. And we've got the spring training games out here, so it's easy to go see that stuff. But it's hard for me to actually get into it on TV. And this is a sad time of year for me, man, because you've got college basketball is over. So my beloved Tar Heels lost to Kansas in the finals. I don't really watch baseball. The NBA is just very, very difficult for me to watch because just the way the game has changed and how, the NBA has shifted over the last 10, 15 years to try to cater more to the fans and what they think they want to see. So they speed up the game. They want more points. They want more dunks. And, you end up with, a lot less fundamentals being shown and, no defense anymore. I mean, that's the biggest thing when you look at back in the 90s with us. And I get the whole generational thing. Everybody thinks their generation was the best. But truly, when you look at the players back in our generation versus now, especially with the NBA, it's night and day. You look at my son always gives me shit when I bag on, LeBron James and this and that. But I think the way the game was played now has done a injustice to a lot of these players, because you take somebody like LeBron James, who is probably arguably one of the greatest athletes to ever play the sport. But you know what? You're only going to see one side of his game. Whereas, people talk about Michael Jordan and the scoring and this and that. What people forget, hey, he was Defensive Player of the Year as well. He was an all-team defensive player as well. So you saw the full aspect of athletes back then, and nowadays you just don't see it. And what scares me now, and Luke, I think you had some more info on it, but talking about the NCAA transfer portal. So, Carolina gave Duke their final loss in the regular season, and then put them out of the tournament in the Final Four, which was the first time they ever met in the Final Four, which is awesome. But now you find out that Coach K's grandson, who played for Duke, he just entered the transfer portal. And I think we were talking earlier, you let me know that it's also college football as well. So, back in the day, you had these rules where they prevented the building of super teams in college. And they did that by saying, okay, if you transferred, just for whatever reason, right? You played a year and you're like, I don't like this school anymore. I'm going somewhere else to play for a bigger name or this or that. You had to sit out an entire year. And what that did was, like, if you have a conference like the ACC and you've got your all-star player, in Florida State, which, they've had some rough years in basketball, and you're like, hey, I'm not really getting the TV time, this and that. And your guy who averages 19, 20, 25 points a game, you say, well, hey, you know what? Maybe I enter the transfer portal and I go up and I go play for a Carolina or I go play for a Duke somewhere where I'm going to get more TV time. I'm going to get more exposure. And then what happens is you have all these athletes moving all around the league. And it's even, in my opinion, it's even worse than NBA, because NBA, you have to negotiate, there's a salary there, salary cap. And really for the NCAA, the only thing capping it is the amount of scholarships. I think each team gets, it's either 12 or 13 scholarships. And beyond that, that's all they can offer. So then the student would have to pay their own way or whatever. But outside of that, that's it. So, I mean, if you're a fledgling team or you're trying to put somebody together, I mean, you go out there and you hit these transfer portals, very, very hard. And then on top of that, and I wasn't tracking all of it. Again, Luke, I think he's got more info on it, but players now can make money off their likeness in the NCAA. And I don't know what the caveat to that is. I think, I think they can use their image, they can use their name. I think they still might have a cap on actually like working somewhere and getting paid. But when you look at that, it just gives these kids all the more incentive. I mean, think about if you're at a mid-major college, right? Or maybe if you're out west, in the Pac-12 or whatever, and you're like, hey, screw this, man. I'm averaging 23 points a game, 5 assists and 2 or 3 blocks or whatever. I'm heading east. I'm going to Kentucky. Because I'm going to get the TV time, I'm going to get the scouting. The more TV time I have, the more my likeness is going to go up, the more value I'm worth, right? The more value I have, the more money I'm going to make. So it turns it into a money thing. So, it kind of worries me with college basketball going forward. And, in all fairness, I mean, Carolina has done well with the transfer portal. We picked up Manick last year or this year. And he was phenomenal. And Puff Johnson's brother, we picked him up in the transfer portal from Pittsburgh. So we've done onesies and twosies. I guess, Luke, how long do you think it is before you start seeing college teams trying to put together super teams where maybe it's not just onesies and twosies in the transfer portal? It's like I'm picking up an entire squad.
Well, Texas Tech kind of did it last year. I mean, it wasn't a super team. They none of the transfers they got were super standouts where they came from, but they were all good. Our team this last year is pretty decent, and that was largely because of the transfer portal. Mark Adams, the current coach, is apparently really good at that, and he always has been, is scouting those players out and enticing them to come over to another program. So with the transfer portal, it's kind of messed up. Yeah, North Carolina is really good at it. It looks like they're going to get Terrence Shannon. Is that from our team?
It's funny because Armando Bacot, which is, he's the guy coming back next year, our senior. And I guess as soon as it wasn't like 10 minutes, man, Shannon was like, basically, hey, thanks, Texas Tech peeps, doing okay, these are goodbyes. And it wasn't 5 minutes. Armando was like, hey, man, just quit fooling, quit everybody, quit all the waiting and just, come on over to Chapel Hill. And who knows if that happens or not, but
yeah. And he might be a poison pill for y'all's team. He's not, he's a great player and, everybody loved him here, but he's a bit of a diva. He was injured a lot of last year too. So, we'll see how that goes. Transfer portal, that is what it is. I'm kind of not necessarily on the fence, but I could kind of see both sides of this from the athlete's perspective. Let them go and play. I mean, I've been around Texas athletics for a really long time, and the league, the UIL that manages Texas sports is very, 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 or at least was very strict on transfers. Like if you moved, like if you even had a good reason to move, a lot of times, at least back in the 80s and 90s, especially the 90s, you had to sit out a year if you're moving to a big high school, and that was mainly for football. Because a lot of these teams in Houston and North Dallas were putting together super teams in the 80s that were just unbeatable. And, the school district, with all the trustees were paying for their parents' houses and stuff. It was crazy. But, what the name, image likeness thing, NIL, new rules in college sports is, I'm pretty sure it's all the sports. Sorry about my phone there. I'm pretty sure it's all the sports because all the articles I was reading just said NCAA. It didn't specify basketball. So, again, fact check me if I'm wrong on that, Ryan, out there, bunch of sharpshooters. But but yeah, I what we were talking about, this is take 4 now. We had to do another break, so hopefully this works. But
hey, Josh, by the way, Joe Dillon's back with the Nationals. Just letting you know that.
No shit.
So what I'm worried about with the name, image, likeness thing is the smaller markets versus the bigger markets going forward. What I would like to see soon is like who are the top earners in the name, image, likeness thing this year? Because where I am, Texas Tech, my team, it's a market of 300,000 people, 350,000 tops, and it's like I saw a few local commercials, one for an orthodontic clinic and stuff, where a couple of the players were on there. I can't imagine they got more than $1,000 for that. But if they're enticed to a bigger market like LA, parts of Florida, New York, along the East Coast, I think even UNC would be in pretty good shape with that, considering where they are and the amount of people that are there. If in these bigger markets where they go from doing an orthodontic clinic to a law firm or a huge car dealership in a big market, is that going to entice players? I mean, and football will be even more interesting because there's only 5 starters on a basketball team. Whereas football, you got a lot more players than that. Starting 22. So that'll be interesting to see where it goes forward. I mean, I think we talked about it in a previous show about college players getting paid. I'd like to think that a lot more thought went into the decision for the name, image, likeness than we're putting into it, because I think you're right, Roger. They're still not allowed to work, and the reason for that is schools like Miami and back in the day, and probably Penn State, USC. People were, oh yeah, just show up for 3 hours a week or 1 hour, not even that. We'll just put you on the payroll and boom, you're getting paid to play.
Right.
So that hopefully they put in more thought into it than that. And I don't know what the cap is. I don't know if there's a cap. I don't know. It'd be interesting to dig into that more. But I don't know. I mean, for now, the transfer portal is fun for me because our team is better because of it. But if we start suffering because everyone's going to Kentucky or Gonzaga or UNC, Kansas, and so on and so forth, then we'll see. What's surprising? I don't know. With college basketball, I think it's awesome how the Pac-12 aren't very good anymore. I think that's awesome because back in the day, UCLA. I mean, remember when the Bruins were good? That was crazy, man. It's just things change. I want to kick it to Josh real quick, and let's talk about those combat sports a little bit because Josh want to bring up a couple points. So let's talk about those combat sports, those Mortal Kombat sports.
Yeah. Real quick before we get on that, talking about the name, image, likeness thing, Nick Saban came out here last week before, and actually talked about this in the transfer portal and how the name, image, likeness was going to completely change college football, because now you essentially have an NFL kind of structure, but nobody's under contract. Everybody's a free agent. And people can go where they want, and they have, now you have, the name, image, likeness. Hey, I can pay you for your name, image, likeness, and everything, and you have boosters who can now influence where players go, and there's other influences outside the purview of those teams and those colleges. That can influence players, like you said, on, where they go. And so so this came up. This was literally an issue with Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. Somebody came out and they accused Jimbo Fisher of, luring. They had about $8 million, that they used and in a kind of quasi name, image, likeness contract. It was like, hey, we have $8 million to spend on someone's name, image, and likeness, whoever, our top guys are. So, use that information for what you will. And all of a sudden it was like, people are like, no whammies, big bucks, smashing that, transfer portal button. And so, Dabo Sweeney came out and, he echoed Nick Saban's comments like, hey, this is absolutely going to change college football. And Dabo Sweeney went on to say that he predicts, in the next 10 years, college football is going to have a commissioner with rules and, for everybody. And it's basically going to be the NFL. And when we did do the show and we talked about this. And at the time, I was against paying players for their name, image, and likeness. I've changed that a little bit, after reading further. Like Luke says, oftentimes, I'm allowed to change my mind when presented with new information. But I still think that this is going to change college football. Ultimately, I do think you should be paid for your name, image, and likeness. All right. You can't go make money off of my name and I don't get anything. But I think people need to be prepared for the second and third order effects of this. It is going to change college football and make it more like the NFL ultimately, because we used to watch college football. And it was fun to watch because you had a group of, you call them kids, but they're adults. They're all over the age 18. They're all technically adults, but they're out there busting their ass playing because they are trying to get to the next level. Right? They're not, this isn't Jerry Maguire or, this isn't Any Given Sunday where it's like, nah, man, I ain't getting hurt for this team because, I got to get paid next year. It was kids out there laying themselves out, wide receivers laying themselves out in the flat, trying to catch a pass, knowing that safety is about to just completely take their head off. I don't know that you're going to see that as much anymore because, hey man, I'm trying to get paid. I'm not, dude. I've got 2 years left, 3 years left here, however long. I'm trying to get paid. I'm not trying to get hurt. So I don't know. No one can predict the future, but if we know human nature, once you start throwing somebody, money at people, it tends to change them, and it's not always for the good. So when we talk, so we're talking, the sports. So I saw it the other day, and Roger follows the WWE more than I do, and probably a little bit more than Luke does, and Luke follows it a little bit more than I do. But it's kind of thumbing through the book of faces, and I saw Ronda Rousey is gonna fight. Who is it? Charlotte Flair. So is her first name Charlotte, right? Yeah. And Ric Flair's daughter, and it gave me pause for a second because one, Ronda Rousey, I do like watching the UFC, but there for a second it did give me pause because I was like, damn man, Ric Flair's daughter. I remember watching Ric Flair back in the day. It's like now his daughter is wrestling. I was like, damn, I'm old. One, so I was like, how old am I? Right. And so, then you got Dusty Rhodes' son is wrestling now. You got a number of, some of the I say the iconic wrestlers, their kids are in the sport now. And I think about how much it's changed. And Roger, I throw it over to you with this question. And I'm gonna do you like you do us here for a second. And so I'll give you the question first, and then I'm gonna talk for another minute. How has wrestling changed in the sense of, and I ask this, partly because I don't watch it a whole lot anymore, as like the good versus evil, right? Because back in the day, back in the 80s, in the early 90s, man, you had good versus evil. You had Hulk Hogan, Hacksaw Jim Duggins. You had America versus Andre the Giant and Nikita Koloff. You had Hulk Hogan versus you had Sergeant Slaughter versus the Iron Sheik. And it was always that good versus bad, thing. And is that still present in wrestling? Do you think? And then, what do you kind of, whatever you think about, seeing the wrestlers we grew up with, their kids now in the sport and kind of taking over.
So it's always the heels versus the faces, right? And heels being bad guys, faces being good guys for those that aren't, up on the vernacular. But it's weird because when we watched it when we were kids, we're like with Ric Flair. So you had bad guys, you had the heels, and there was some popularity with the Ric Flairs, but it was more of an envy thing, right? He had the Rolex, Space Mountain, the long blonde hair, the women on his arms, the mink coat, the limousines and jets and this and that. Yeah, he brought up like Ted DiBiase. There was a lot of envy in it. People wanted to be like that, not because they necessarily like the character, but who doesn't want to be rich? Well, I mean, I guess nowadays because we're vilifying all billionaires. But anyway, it's another story. But back then that's what you wanted. You wanted to be Ric Flair with the Rolex and the two chicks on his arms and this and that. That changed a lot with Stone Cold Steve Austin because he came in, he was the bad guy. And I say him, there was him, Razor Ramon, NWO, that whole cast right there, where, okay, it was cool to be the bad guy. And that's where wrestling really changed. And yeah, you hit it on the head. That was the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era it was cool to be the bad guy. But you know what? I mean, you call it, it's perfectly named the Attitude Era because at that point, it was our culture at the time. That was the 90s, right? And that was everything from the music, to alternative music that had come out, to the sports. Just everything was that way. And it was very reflective of, where we were as a society and our identity as a society. And so they've tried to replicate that over the course of the last couple of decades. And this is why the golden years of wrestling are over with. And this is why AEW is coming back and doing well and starting to take market share out of WWE is, again, they lost a lot of the fundamentals. People tried to replicate it, but man, you get some of those stars like that, it's like trying to replicate another Michael Jordan, right? It's just, you can try. It's just not going to happen. Something natural has to happen. And that's how Stone Cold Steve, that's how he got his name was, he was married to his wife and they were looking for a new gimmick because he was Stunning Steve at the time. And she was handing him a cup of coffee and she was like, man, this thing is stone cold. And they're like, that's my name, Stone Cold Steve Austin. It just kind of happened, right? And then, he came out when Jake the Snake Roberts was on his, religious revival. And that's when Stone Cold Steve Austin came up after the Royal Rumble and says, Austin 316 says, I just kicked your ass. And that kind of kicked it off. That was like, wow. And when you look at, obviously hindsight, but you watch a lot of the documentaries and the other wrestlers, they were like, man, when he came out and said that, he's like, you knew it right then, everything was changing. And it did, because then it became cool to be the bad guy, not necessarily because of the money, not necessarily because of the envy, not necessarily because of, the women and Space Mountain, this and that. It was just like, hey man, it was cool to be the bad guy. Then you had Razor Ramon, who just passed away, right? That was his thing, right? Be the bad guy. It's like, good times don't last, but bad guys last forever, or whatever the hell he said to it. But there's something similar to that. But so that's what's changed a lot. And then when you look at WWE now, you have some wrestlers that are trying to replicate it as opposed to, hey man, just kind of go out and do your thing. And the fans will tell you what works. And I think that's part of the problem with the WWE is, one, it's become a complete soap opera, which anybody who's watched WWE versus AEW has really gone back to old school where, hey man, we're opening up with wrestling matches and they're going to be 25, 30-minute wrestling matches. And the character of that wrestler is going to come through in the match. Back in the day, I remember, Tommy Wildfire Rich, he was one of the, original faces where like he wouldn't even go off the ropes because going off the ropes was cheating. That was just using something you weren't supposed to use, right? Look where we're at now, steel chairs and barbed wire and everything else. But AEW has gone back to, hey, we're going to let the ring speak for the character. You'll figure out who the face and the heel is based on how they perform in the ring, and then being very reactive to the fan base. What's pretty interesting now, though, is you're starting to get a lot of, now that AEW's got some traction, and I think everybody knew this was going to happen. Tony Khan knew this, that wrestlers are going to start to pop back and forth. So you've got WWE wrestlers that have transitioned and gone over to AEW. Like you mentioned off the top, Cody Rhodes is now back in the WWE. He left AEW because he just, it wasn't going the same direction I think he wanted to go. Being one of the founders and decided to go back to WWE. It's gotten so bad that Vince McMahon has reportedly gone back and said that wrestlers can no longer use their real names in the WWE. Because what's happening is, and what he sees is that these athletes are going to use, they use their real names, marketing, name recognition, global. And then all of a sudden, look at CM Punk. He goes to AEW And to me, if his name was Joe Smith, everybody like, who gives a shit about Joe Smith? But you see CM Punk on the banner, right? You're like, oh, I know CM Punk. I know that dude. And it's immediate market share. So, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I still watch both. I can tell you with WWE, I fast forward through a lot of that stuff because a lot of it's just a soap opera. I actually want to get to some of the action. I actually have a problem with, you brought up like the Ronda Rousey, and it brings up like the Ronda Rousey's, your Brock Lesnar's, and which, I mean, dude, there's not, you can't debate it, right? Brock Lesnar, I mean, that dude is a freak of nature. Same thing with Ronda Rousey, with what she's done in the MMA and then coming over to WWE. My problem with it is they're gimmicks that don't last long, that the networks are using for an immediate bump, and it truly hurts the storyline of wrestling. When we go back to like the Four Horsemen and, Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, or Ric Flair, I mean, dude, these things went on for years. I mean, they had battles that went on like with Ricky the Dragon's team. These things went on for like a decade, right? And that's how that story built up. And, one of the things that I saw recently was Hangman Adam Page when he won the title in AEW, I guess it's probably about 6 months ago now. They actually took like 18 months and built his story up to where he came in, he was the prodigy, he's the heir apparent, then, came across an alcohol problem, and they played this storyline out to like, I mean, me watching wrestling for 40 years, I actually sat there and I'm like, dude, is this real? Is this part of his personal life? Or, I mean, it had me fooled because it went on so long and they built it up. And then finally he wins the AEW championship, and it was one of the peaks of their ratings. Fans were like, man, I'm actually into this thing. I don't know, Luke. I don't know where wrestling goes. I don't know how often you watch it anymore. It's tough because I find myself watching more AEW than anything because of the wrestling. But WWE, dude, I tell you, I've got down to a pat. I hit fast forward 3 times on my remote control. I skim through all that crap. I get to the match. I kind of catch about 30 seconds of the dramatic snippet at the very beginning to kind of figure out what the storyline is, and then everything else I can kind of play out. So I don't know if wrestling makes the big comeback. And like Josh said, when you look at athletes, the heels, the faces, I mean, what's the future for WWE or AEW?
I don't know. It's the same as, I think you were on to something with, wrestling being a reflection of the culture at the time. And I think for at least the past 15 years, I think that at least American culture has really been struggling to find exactly what it's all about. There's nothing new under the sun. And we are, all three of us, getting to be kind of old fogies, not really following the culture. But when I do follow the culture, what the youngins are listening to and what their interests and their fashion and things. I mean, just God, look at the fashion itself. Yeah, I'm going off on a tangent here, but just look at the fashion. I mean, my stepson, he's got a real good fashion sense. He really does. I mean, he knows, he's following all the trends and things like that. Back in our day, a trend would last 2 or 3 years, man. It might last all the way through your high school years. 4 straight years. Girbaud jeans were cool with the long braided belts, that you looped around, and tight rolling the jeans at the base.
I know you tight rolled.
But, okay, God, I'm really going off the rails here, but I got an argument with one of my high school buddies a few years ago, and I said, man, I never rolled my jeans. Y'all are crazy. I never fell into that. That's ridiculous. And he's like, yes, you did, Luke. You did. Friend's name's Michael. He listens occasionally. But he's like, you did. I remember you did. And I was like, y'all are crazy. No, I didn't. And he dug up like a photograph. It was before online anything, before the Book of Faces. He dug out a photograph of me with freaking rolled jeans. I was like, man, even I did that.
Can you send that to us?
Hey, if Mike is listening,
I
you're
could try
going to
to
need that
find
photo.
I could try to find it because it looks ridiculous. My family didn't have enough money. It's like Josh and probably Roger. I had to do the fashion on the cheap. The Girbaud jeans was the big thing, man. I saved up for, I worked all through high school. I saved up for a long time to buy a pair of $60 jeans. That was a lot back then. And I had one pair, and man, I was careful not to wear them every day because people might catch on in high school. But back to my stepson, he lives, near us, and he comes over, occasionally, have dinner or something. And I swear every other time he comes over, he has switched his style to whatever's the newest thing. And we're talking like every month or two. And it's kind of crazy. And we're moving really fast. So back to the wrestling thing.
Rollers, man.
No, it ain't us buying it. The kids working and shopping at the thrift shop because all these styles that these kids are wearing college age are not like expensive brand name styles. Most of them. There was a Carhartt phase, believe it or not. All these kids were into Carhartt, and I was like, "Well, man, kid, I got a ton of Carhartt stuff. That's my thing." And he's looking through. You know how much you could get for this on the secondary market? And I was like, "What the hell?" So but for the most part, they're picking up these styles, from the thrift shop, the stuff you can find at the thrift shop. There was a mechanic trucker style, a few where they wear the trucker or mechanic style, like it's weird. So back to the wrestling thing, I mean, it makes sense that things are so fast paced, at least in the WWE, because things have got to change. We got to move with the times and things. I mean, it's kind of a reflection of the times, I believe. So once you know things start hitting more consistently, maybe it'll come back and be as interesting as it was in the 80s, in the 90s, and even the early 2000s, because you had your Goldbergs and Brock Lesnar started out in wrestling before MMA and then came back. So I'm not a gimmick guy myself, but I say that, but I also say I didn't roll my jeans in high school. But it was funny, on one of the takes that we had to cut, and when we cut the recording, all three of us talked for 5 minutes or so, and like as soon as we cut the recording, because my internet sucked, we got in like just an instant debate over MMA and boxing. It happened so fast. I was hoping to recreate that here. I guess we won't. Like with Ronda Rousey. Speaking of MMA this time, not the wrestling, because I haven't watched her wrestle at all. I kind of follow this story, but Ronda Rousey, I acknowledge, because I think I said, when we cut the video, I was like, Ronda Rousey sucked. I'm going to back off that. She didn't suck. Okay. She was good. She's very talented, but I think she was there at the right place at the right time. They also blew her up huge to brand the UFC. So every win's like she's unstoppable. But it's like, man, she fought Holly Holm and just got knocked TF out. And Holly Holm's a really good boxer, and Rousey had never seen that before. But she did, face some pretty good competition. Um, I liken her, for those who follow MMA, I liken her to Chuck Liddell a little bit. Chuck Liddell was dominant back in the day, but he was competing at a time where the competition just wasn't there. It was a perfect window for him to be dominant. But I wouldn't put him up against some of the best MMA fighters that I consider in the light heavyweight division. So now on to boxing, Josh, and this is where we really got kind of heated. I compare Ronda Rousey and Chuck Liddell also to Mike Tyson. I
Oh
will
Lord.
say that both of them, Ronda Rousey and Chuck Liddell, were very good. Mike Tyson was very good, very, very good. But he came along at a time where it was the right place, right time. Man, we've said that a lot the past couple of days, right place, right time. But he came along at a time and place in boxing history where it's like, man, this is your time, because the competition, again, just wasn't as stiff as it was just a few years after he went to prison. So Mike Tyson, look, I'll put it to you this way, Josh. Josh said, "Who's Josh?" Like, "Oh, you're full of whatever." And he's like, "Who's the best boxer of all time?" Put me on the spot, and I don't even hesitate. And I'm talking like pound for pound, not like who could beat anybody, but Muhammad Ali is number one for me. I don't think there is any, in my mind, anyone even close. Like Roger was talking about, LeBron James versus Kobe Bryant versus Michael Jordan. Okay, there's kind of a debate there. I know where I stand on that issue, but I'll hear people out when they talk about that. But with Muhammad Ali, I'm not going to hear anybody out when they compare him to Mike Tyson. I'm just not. And going down the list from there in no particular order, just who I consider some of the best of all time: Sugar Ray Robinson, Rocky Marciano, Sugar Ray Leonard. Unfortunately, Floyd Mayweather Jr. I mean, I've watched a lot of his bouts, and the guy is a great boxer. He really is. But again, I'll say it again: right place, right time for him. You know, he never fought anybody like Sugar Ray Leonard. He did fight, what's his name? Filipino guy is escaping me. God, I can't
Manny
remember
Pacquiao.
his name. Pacquiao, yeah. But yeah, I mean, but again, like Oscar De La Hoya, he was really good. Cesar Chavez, the original. He was super good, and I loved Roy Jones Jr. But man, the heavyweight competition now, 5-6 years ago, just off the charts. And now you got Tyson Fury in there. It's like, who the hell is this doughboy? But then you watch him fight, and the guy is brilliant. He's a brilliant boxer. If you haven't watched him fight, I really encourage you to do so. So, Josh, as far as boxing, I don't know how much you follow it. You said you agreed with me that Muhammad Ali is best of all time. So make a case why Mike Tyson is number 2. Now, I'll say it one more time. I'm not taking anything away from Tyson. In his prime, dude was scary. But I would have liked to see. I wish he hadn't got beat by Buster Douglas, Josh, because Buster Douglas was supposed to be a tune-up fight, which was a bad decision because Buster Douglas was a tough fighter. But if he would have beat Buster Douglas, we would have saw him and Holyfield compete at near prime level. And that would have been a brilliant fight. That would have solved this argument right now.
Yeah. So I never said Mike Tyson was the number 2. Just to throw it out there. I was saying, so we got on the boxing thing. And for starters, I agree. Pound for pound, there has never been a better boxer than Muhammad Ali. None whatsoever. And I even think the number 2, who I would honestly, I would have to go, do some research to figure out who my number 2 would be. I don't even think they come close to Cassius Clay. I mean, that guy was an absolute animal. And, dude, anybody that talks that much, that much as you call it yang, and then gets in the ring and then backs it up and just throttles through people, the guy was unstoppable. And he was just a incredible athlete. When they asked him how many sit-ups he did, he was like, I don't know, I don't count till it starts hurting. You're just like, oh, this dude's amazing. But Mike Tyson, when Mike Tyson was in his prime, that guy was a juggernaut. Mike Tyson did fight some good folks. Now the Buster Douglas fight, yes, it was a tune-up fight. Mike was supposed to win that. Dude, the scouts failed him on that. The scouts absolutely failed him on that. He should have never fought Buster Douglas as a tune-up fight. But I still think that Buster Douglas fight, Buster Douglas was good, but I think he got lucky. I think if Mike Tyson went back, you give Mike Tyson that fight a couple more times, I think he beats Buster Douglas every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And when it came to Tyson and Holyfield in their prime, dude, I think Tyson takes him. I think Tyson takes him. It was hard, in Mike Tyson's defense, it was kind of hard to watch him, to be able to say, well, he didn't fight anybody, or, you never really got to watch him fight. It's because he was knocking dudes out in the first 30 seconds. I remember, so my neighbor, guy I grew up with, his dad watched boxing all the time. And so, whenever boxing was on, we were always over at his house watching it. My dad didn't watch boxing. My dad was a NASCAR guy, and but he watched boxing, and he would get the pay-per-views. He would do the pay-per-view, and get it, or it was HBO. He would get HBO just for that, and then he would get pissed off because Mike Tyson knocked somebody out in 30 seconds, and everybody's like, "Damn it! I paid how much to see this, to watch this for 30 seconds?" I don't know that I don't think that Holyfield beats Tyson in his prime. I don't.
No.
But when you talk Tyson, and I agree, he was a right place, right time guy, but he was a juggernaut nonetheless in his prime. And
you talk about a sport that's just really kind of gone downhill because of the promotions and the different championships. I mean, you never get a good matchup. I mean, you do, but you're not going to get like, okay, so Lennox Lewis was up and coming when, they were talking about Holyfield and Tyson fighting. And dude, Lennox Lewis, who knows what he could have done if they would have thrown him in there, but there's not enough hype around him yet. So the bottom line is we're probably not seeing, for years now, it's probably been like this for 30 years, we're probably not seeing the best possible bouts we can see, especially on the heavyweight level. It's just there's too much money involved. There's too much promotion, you know?
Yeah. And that's,
And
you talk about Mayweather. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but you talk about Mayweather. Mayweather is he is the LeBron James of boxing, right? When you talk about Mayweather, that guy is he is a colossal douchebag, and he's a prize fighter. He's
yeah,
not going to fight anybody unless the odds are 99% that he's going to beat him, right? And in the Pacquiao fight, it's just Mayweather won't fight. Mayweather will not fight. He is going to win based off points. He's not knocking anybody out. He is, dude. He's winning off points, and that to me, that's not boxing. And I
yeah,
think that's why MMA was so big when it came out, because boxing was on the down. It was trending downwards. MMA came out and it's like, okay, here's folks who are not afraid to make contact. Right, heavyweight boxing was done. You had the Floyd Mayweathers coming up, and it was like these dudes are dancing around the ring. It's like, no, man, MMA, like those dudes are getting in there, they're locking up, and they are, and they're drawing blood. And that's what, dude. At the end of the day, man, dude, that's what people want to see. They want to see the Coliseum and gladiators.
Yeah, there's been a lot of other news going on, but I want to close out on the boxing thing real quick, especially when you look at, your Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali. I mean, first, you can't control your competition, right? It's when you looked at Ronda, and again, like Luke said, I mean, right place, right time. You look at Ronda Rousey, the competition wasn't there. I think you hit spot on with the Chuck Liddell and even the Randy Couture's, right? You just didn't have the competition then that you have now. And so some of that you say, hey, it is what it is. I mean, you're limited to who's around you. The big thing that I saw with Tyson, and I didn't watch a lot of boxing. I watched the big fights. I think probably like most of us did, but we didn't get a lot of pay-per-view back in the day. It's mainly like Josh said, you paid for it, and then 19 seconds later, you're like, what the fuck just happened? Like, I went to go get some tea and the match is over or whatever. So, we didn't get a lot of that stuff. But one thing I noticed, especially like watching Muhammad Ali, and then you transition to other sports, going back to like Jordan with basketball and a lot of your other greats, they adapt. And this goes back to like what Luke is saying with the, how well do you come back from a beating? They adapt and they change your style. And I think that's a lot of what happened with Mike Tyson. And you start to see it with Ronda Rousey, and you see it big time in the MMA. Once somebody figures you out, you're done unless you can change. And I think when you look at a lot of these great boxers, especially back in the day, because I think back in the day when you talk about that Muhammad Ali or George Foreman, Larry Holmes, that era, it's like, dude, you had a lot of great fighters, and you had to bring different skill sets because you're going to fight every fight different. Tyson brought one fight to the game. That was it. I'm going to knock your ass out in the first 2 minutes of the round, and if that doesn't happen, then I'm probably going to be in trouble, right? And I think that's what we saw, especially as he goes on. They start to figure you out. So with the boxing thing, it's I think it's so hard to compare because it's even defending your LeBron James and your Kevin Durant's and those guys nowadays. It's so unfair to compare them back to the Muhammad Ali era just because the amount of talent that was there. I mean, Muhammad Ali beat everybody. And to Luke's point, I think he had like 5-6 losses, something like that. Yeah, he had some losses, and pretty much still came back and beat everybody that was anybody in his era, and that competition was just 10 times what it was in Tyson's era. I pulled up, and I had a little bit of a little bit of a head start here from take 1, 2, and 3. But when you look at Tyson, his number one fight, his big victory was Michael Spinks. Michael Spinks was 31-0, blew him away in 91 seconds. Trevor Berbick, Frank Bruno, Larry Holmes. Of course, at that point, Larry Holmes was nowhere near the Larry Holmes that he was. And that's kind of it, man. That's who he had, and some of these names on here, like the number 2 guy, Tony Tucker, Pinklin Thomas. I mean, some of these guys, man, I've never even heard of, right? Like, yeah, okay, I heard the name thrown around, but it is definitely not the who's who of boxing. So some of that you're limited to, but I think when you look at those athletes, it's adapting. And when you watch Jordan from his heyday to, when he started developing his jump shot to the 3-point shot, you have to be able to change. And I think your great athletes, they show that. Wrapping it back up with what Josh was saying, he makes a good point with the athletes changing, and all of a sudden, money becomes very involved. It's I'm gonna poop on LeBron here, but you're already starting to see it with your big names. They're one game out of the playoffs. There were 7 or 8 games left. They were one game behind the Pelicans for the last play-in spot, and he's got sore ankles and he doesn't play. I remember when Michael Jordan missed a couple games when they were one game out of the playoffs, and he couldn't play because of sore ankles. Oh yeah, that's right. That never happened. And I think, you look at that, it's like it's the almighty dollar. Hey, where's my longevity? Did my sore ankles really, keep me out of this game? I mean, it's like, man, you guys have a chance for the playoffs. I mean, even with like you look at like your Kobe Bryants and these guys. I mean, these guys, dude, they were playing, man. Like, hey, we're one game out of the playoffs. Like, I'm playing. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to play. You just don't see that with a lot of athletes now. And I shouldn't say that. I say, I pick on LeBron a lot. You do have some NBA players that are out there that still shock me, but I think a lot of that's changed. On to some of the other stuff. I mean, it's crazy because like I was saying, we got all this news. It's funny because during the first 4 takes, I had all these, these news articles you're going to write up, and then all of a sudden everything changed yesterday with the mask mandate, right? So, you had a couple big ticket items, and I guess we can go around real quick on a couple of these things. I'll throw a couple out, give my thoughts, and then kick it over to you, Luke. One, the Easter Bunny. And I would tell you, I want to cry and laugh at the same time because it was very awkward for those that were watching. So Joe Biden goes out there and then, people start asking questions. And then this Easter Bunny comes up like awkwardly and like pulls him away. Right. And even he looks like, what's going on? And so it's kind of like, man, that's kind of weird. And then, he's got the spot where he sits with Jill and, Jill's telling him what to do. And then at the end, she's like, wave. Oh yeah, I'm waving. It was all kind of weird. And then come to find out later on Twitter, a couple hours later, it comes to find out that the lady in the bunny outfit, and I'm gonna jack it up, but she's similar department, was part of his communications department, like media releases or something like that. She was staged, right? She was there to make sure that Joe, and don't get me wrong, okay? I get it. Everybody's got that fail safe. Hey, look, yeah, it's time to get you out of here, yada, yada, yada. But he didn't even know what was going on. Like his administration put her out there in that bunny outfit and said, hey, as soon as they start asking, you're pulling this dude away. It has gotten so bad. And again, this is where I want to laugh and cry. It's gotten so bad that you had to take one of his staffers, put them in an Easter bunny outfit to protect him from answering questions. Unbelievable. The next thing is the mask mandate. Josh was throwing out some news, some updates that the White House or the Department of Justice may end up trying to appeal that. A lot of news is going back and forth. Here's what I'll say about this before I kick it over to you, Luke. I mean, the left is imploding over the mask mandates being lifted on public transportation. Like, I don't understand it. They are literally imploding. And I think with I'm kind of shocked. I guess I shouldn't be shocked. I'm shocked at the administration's response to it because to me, out of the several times they've had an opportunity to over the last year, that was the one time, perfect time to pivot. Perfect time to pivot. Hey, you know what? This thing was going to expire in the next week anyway. Hey, thanks to all the hard work and the vigilance of Americans out there, wearing the mask, washing your hands and socially distancing. We're at a point where this thing's controlled. It's still out there. It's still a threat. We still need to be vigilant, but we're in a good spot to be able to transition and move on to where it's life with COVID. And they didn't do that. I mean, Psaki almost immediately doubled down on it, and then Joe this morning was in New Hampshire, and then somebody asked him about it, like, people can wear what they want to wear. But then you have the DOJ come out and say, well, you know what? If the CDC warrants it, we're going to file an appeal. So, Luke, give us your thoughts on the Easter Bunny, and then the left imploding on the mask mandates.
I'm with you. I want to laugh and cry, man. I was listening to something today, and the guy, the person I was listening to, a fellow podcaster, you may have heard of him, Ben Shapiro. He's almost as big as C3, but he was laughing kind of about it because he's just like, he's like, I just give up. This is absolutely funny. And the way he described it, I caught myself laughing at it. Whereas I was just like, just when you think it can't get any worse with, Biden and Obama giving him the cold shoulder. And I think we were all three kind of worked up about that. The Easter Bunny happens. And it's like, oh my God, how much worse is it going to get? Jill Biden, I don't know if you guys saw, they were standing up and she had to tell him to clap. He said, happy Easter. He just kind of stood there and she goes, clap. And so he starts clapping. And then, I think earlier in the day, they were reading a children's book, and it was pathetic. I don't even want to replay what was going on. It was just so bad. I don't know. I don't know where this goes. Maybe Josh can touch on, where does this go? I mean, it's time to have a real serious conversation. I know we haven't liked Joe Biden from the beginning, but he is the president now. He does have major responsibilities. It's time to have a serious conversation about the 25th Amendment on both sides. And I think that some in the Democrat Party, not the left, but the Democrat Party, are warming to that fact that we might need a serious conversation. As far as the masks go, I mean, I'm with you. It's like I do not understand. I mean, I guess the best way to put it is, you remember those old pictures of Little Bighorn, the paintings where it's just those last few soldiers and the Indians are there ready to scalp them. I mean, this masks on public transportation is their last stand. I mean, I see, Fauci and his ilk are Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn with this, because people, as we've said since the very inception of this podcast, people have invested their entire moral being in this COVID thing, and it's coming to an end, and people don't like it. So, yeah, I know that everyone was real happy, all the videos on YouTube and videos on Facebook and Twitter, where they announce it on the aircraft, everybody starts cheering, but I just talked to somebody today that even after the announcement, they, at the particular flight he was taking, the stewardesses, flight attendants, they're stewards, and stewardesses weren't allowing them to take off their mask. So, Josh, what do you think about old Joe Biden? What happens next? I mean, is he going to make it 4 years? I mean, and then the mask. I mean, I'm so done with it.
I don't know if Joe Biden makes it another 4 years. Supposedly he came out, he told Obama yesterday that, he was going to run again in 2024. But at the rate that it's going right now, and you guys talking about, him with, reading with his wife with the children's book, and then the Easter Bunny, minder, and then remember when he got finished up with that one little press conference that he gave, and then he turned around to shake hands, and nobody was standing there. And it was just, and he was basically, and then he started looking around like, where is everybody? And then he went off to one side of the stage and had to be told, no, go exit the other side of the stage. You couple that with, everything else. And there has to be a conversation about the 25th Amendment at some point. Because one, he is clearly in cognitive decline, and we've discussed this, ad nauseum on this podcast, But then again, you got to go back and you ask yourself, and we've discussed this as well, is, hey, who is running the show? Who's minding the store? Because the person that was elected, most votes in history, if you believe it, right? Most votes in history, more than Barry in 08, more than Barry in 2012. Who's minding the store? Because it ain't this guy. So what unelected official is running the show? It's not Kamala, dude. Kamala's been cocked more than John Wayne's rifle. It ain't her. So, you go back and it's, is it Anthony Blinken running foreign policy? Is it Susan Rice running domestic policy with Obama, behind the scenes? I don't know. The guy's an embarrassment. He's a national embarrassment, and at the end of the day, something, they really, both sides of the aisle really need to have a serious discussion about this. As far as the mask mandates go, this is, a year and a half too late. And I'm with Roger on this one. A lot of people celebrated this, and a lot of people, were like, yes, it's happened. It's, thank you to Judge. I think her name was Kimball Mizell, is her name in Florida. People celebrated this, and it was like, yeah, it's good to know that I can go get on an airplane or, public transportation and not be, forced to wear a mask, but I'm not going to thank my kidnapper for letting me go. It's just, this should never have drawn on this long. The CDC is not, they are not elected officials. They are not part of the Constitution. And for those out there who, they're very upset because, they're like, this 33-year-old judge in Florida, this Trump appointed judge isn't old enough to, be able to rule on this and strike down this federal mask mandate. Now, granted, these are the same people who say this 33-year-old judge is not old enough to understand the implications and to be able to make a decision like this. But a 6-year-old child can, choose to, mutilate their genitals if they want to, because, because they want to play with dolls or Tonka trucks, whichever one it may be. Right. These are the same people. So these people are not to be taken seriously to begin with. I generally ignore these people and I mock them, as much as I can on social media, as you guys can see from my Twitter account, which I thought after some of my comments this morning was going to get suspended. So again, the mask mandates and people do all the blue check marks and, the left, like they are going bananas. Like social media has been on fire the last, 24 hours over this. Nobody's telling you that you can't wear a mask. If you still feel the need to wear a mask, dude, wear 10 masks. Like the homeless people Luke saw. Like you wear 10 masks, dude, you can get on that aircraft, put your welder's mask on. Nobody cares. That's fine. That's you. All we're saying is that you can't mandate that somebody else do it, because at the end of the day, we're going to get on with our lives and not partake in this nonsense. And those people who still think that masks are the answer, I hope you wear your mask, because we need to be able to identify who is mentally disabled very easily. So, and then you have you also have a bunch of people who are like, I'm never flying again. I'm not flying again until they, put the mask mandate back in place. That is today's, I'm moving to Canada if Trump gets elected. That is the same damn people. And guess what? Those assholes are going to be on an aircraft next week. And so long overdue. The Justice Department is they're going to appeal it. But at the end of the day, the CDC the CDC can't continue to mandate that there be a mask. It is outside their scope. We talked about this before. And if this was so important, if the masks were so important and they were such a deterrent and, to spreading COVID, Congress, which I believe last time I checked, the Democrats control the White House, Congress would have passed a law. Why hasn't Congress passed a law to make it a law? When you hear on an aircraft, federal law mandates that you wear a mask. No, it doesn't. Federal law does not mandate that, because there is no federal law. It's a mandate from an unelected official in an organization that has gone outside their scope. Yeah, so if you still want to strap that thing to your face, you can still strap it to your face. Nobody's saying you can't. It's just you can't compel or force others to do so. So throw it over to Roger. Roger, give his thoughts on it and then close us out.
Yeah, somebody said it earlier today on Twitter, and because now you're getting to the my body, my choice, the mask, abortion, just a whole bunch of other things, and it's the guy said it best. He was like, you wearing a mask is personal choice. You mandating other people wear a mask is not personal choice. You getting pregnant is personal choice. You mandating others, killing babies or killing the unborn fetus or whatever is not personal choice. So I thought that pretty much wrapped that up. Very nice, neat package that, a lot of folks on the left don't want to address. And that's part of the problem, right? Is like, hey, let's have that debate and let's break these things apart. But they won't have the debate with you. They'll just dox you or whatever. One quick note on the judge. And I don't know anything about her. Okay. All I saw was the ABA rating, unqualified and this and that. And it's, I think I actually responded to one of your posts because what the reason that the ABA gave her an unqualified rating was that she didn't have any trial time as a lawyer, whatever. That's funny because if we're going to go down that road, I kind of want to have the conversation about Elena Kagan being a Supreme Court justice without any judge time. So, especially serving at the highest court. But again, you can't debate any of those things. Canteeners out there, we had a lot to cover. We went off the rails a little bit on some NBA, boxing, wrestling, college basketball, the Easter Bunny, and mass. So hopefully next time, I'm sure there will be a lot more news that we can round up and cover. Thanks again for listening to us. Make sure you head to our website, www.culperscanteencup.com. Thanks again to Carlton Zeus. Stay safe out there and keep your canteen cups tightly secured.